You wanted to be a pro tennis player. You wanted to be a Navy SEAL. You wanted to be a firefighter. You wanted to be a pastor. You wanted to be a nurse and then a doctor. And now you landed where you're at. How did you decide to choose each one? And then how did you realize this isn't it?
Even if I did become a doctor and then ended up sticking with it, I felt that if I didn't deal with those issues, I would always be trying to get to the next level. And it would just be this relentless cycle of the next thing, the next title, the next research paper, or whatever. Just because a door is open doesn't mean it's from the Lord and you should take it. If you're in a big life changing discernment process, I would highly recommend taking your time with it. Do not rush it.
Welcome to Theologics. My name's Brian, and I have on the show today Justin O. What's up?
Hello.
Just to give a quick intro, Justin is somebody I wanted to bring on because he's gone through so many vocational transitions, has a lot of practical experience here. And so just wanted to ask you a few questions, have you share your journey and insights for anyone trying to discern their vocation, or how do you go through that process? First, why don't you just walk me through your vocational journey a little bit?
I think when I was a junior in high school, we're preparing for SATs, trying to get into college, right? And out of all the jobs that we got to explore during career fairs and everything, there was nothing that pulled me or was something that I wanted to do. And so I knew I didn't want to work in a cubicle, but I think I mainly got that idea from other people saying they didn't want to work in a cubicle.
It's just
And
like a
so,
common thing.
yeah, like I was just really influenced by either people that are at corporate jobs or not wanting to work at those corporate jobs. And so just kind of taking in the environment and the surroundings. But I really had like no idea what I wanted to do. And so I just did what I thought would be cool. Yeah. So at the time, I played tennis almost every day. I loved it. And even though that dream seems so far out of reach, I really believed at that time I could become a pro tennis player. And so I put in so much time and invested into that. And then I think when I got beat at a tournament by a 12-year-old, 6-0, 6-0. So that means I didn't win a single game off of him. I had to face the reality
That
that,
was a That's a brutal reality check.
yeah, because I was so optimistic.
Yeah, you were really serious for
Yeah.
a few years.
And I mean, I lost, I think 30 pounds at that time. I was a pretty heavy boy. I was 190. I got back to 160, and just doing all these speed workouts and getting relatively good, right? Making a lot of progress. But that one tournament really hit me hard.
Was that kid a prodigy? Like, was he just really good?
I mean, I thought he was a prodigy at first, and then I saw the other kids at the tournament, and that was almost the standard.
Oh my goodness.
Incredibly good. Started when they were really young too.
And you
But
started late.
I started late. I started freshman in high school pretty much. And so that was a reality check for me. And then the Navy SEAL thing was, oh, I got really fit, you know, really athletic. What about this? And I think I was just trying to be someone cool, because I didn't really feel cool. I was pretty overweight kid growing up, and I had friends, but I was never popular, and I felt that I was often overlooked. And so I wanted to really do something that would garner people's attention.
I guess with Navy SEAL or military, because I think for a lot of guys who graduate high school and don't know what they want to do at all, going the general military route is a common thing that they considered. I guess for you, how did you realize that it wasn't for you?
I think one thing I did do pretty consistently before pursuing a vocational track was I somehow found myself with people that are already in it and getting to hear them and their experiences. And I'm finding that a lot of people were not happy with their military experience. Uh, and just finding out that, yeah, you can get your education paid for. There are a lot of good benefits to it, but you don't necessarily have to do it through the military. You can find other ways and other means. And that's just something that I ultimately decided for myself was I don't want to be away from my friends and family, even if it's for a stint of time. I'd rather be here. And to be honest, I think serving in the youth group since I was in seventh grade, I had a really strong attachment to the community and I did not want to let it go.
Do you feel like that applied to you wanting to be a pastor for a season too?
So we're gonna talk a little bit about our history. So you came back to our church when I was probably a freshman or
Yeah, you're like 15.
yeah, in high school, and you were you became pretty much my mentor figure at that time, and I just wanted to do everything like you, right? And so I would follow you everywhere cuz you were pretty busy doing ministry, speaking at different churches, retreats, meeting with people, counseling people, and I was very fortunate to be able to be a part of that where just even observing and learning from you and you want to become like your mentors or people that have influenced you, right? And so I was like, man, it makes sense for me to do ministry cuz I love people and it seemed that this is within my skill set too cuz I genuinely do love cultivating relationships and thought I could be good at it. And I'm having a firsthand experience watching and learning from someone that's doing it now. And so why wouldn't I do it? And so I would say that's probably one career choice that I wasn't influenced by what other people thought of me, but wanting to be like someone that I admired.
So did you transition from uh, pastoring to biotech slash med school, pursuing med school path? Was that the next thing for you in terms of vocational like aspiration, not in terms of like maybe a job? Because I know that you did the food truck and did a few other things.
Yeah, I think it was nursing first,
Okay, okay,
then biotech, and then med school.
okay. Tell me about the your discernment process or your decision making process for nursing school or nursing.
For nursing, a lot of people said I would be a really good nurse. I care for people. I Nurses typically interact with the patient more than a doctor does. And so being there for people in their most vulnerable times is something that I really wanted to do. And because it was similar to ministry in that aspect for me. You're counseling them, but it within a different context and with different skills. And there was a part of me where, and this isn't a stab at nurses, but more of like, I think I could do more within this medical field. And so that's when exploring the idea of being a PA or becoming a doctor kind of went into play. And I think during that season, I was going through a lot of insecurity with myself because I dropped out of college. I've been doing a lot of things that are non-traditional compared to my peers. And so I wanted to find a way to catch up in a sense, not necessarily with time, but within prestige and like where I should be. And so that's when I decided to go for medical school because my parents would be proud of me, even though finding out now they've always been proud of me. Doesn't really matter what I do. But I had this self deception and these thoughts in my head where I just had to prove to people that I was worth something, especially to my peers and just Korean American culture, but also just to like I was even thinking about like friends in high school, like I want to be something, and that was the path that I had decided on, and yeah, I learned a lot from it, but I'm so glad I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Well, I remember talking to, I don't know if it was on the phone or in person, when you were thinking about that shift from nursing to being a doctor. And I thought one thing that was good was that you were saying that I, f- you felt like when it came to nursing, again, no knock on nurses, but it was just, you kind of felt like you were underestimating yourself. That you thought that before that you were kind of dumb, that you weren't smart enough to do something like that. And then after kind of engaging it and like seeing how quickly you're picking up on it, you're like, no, maybe I could shoot for this. Maybe this is something worth going for. And so even though you didn't go down that path ultimately, I do think that thinking of realizing that you're more capable was actually pretty healthy.
Yeah, and to give a little bit more context with that, I did just enough to skate through high school and college, and well, at least college my first round. And I'll have to say I really believed that I was dumb, especially with science and any STEM classes. I don't know when it came to be, but I just felt like I couldn't learn or do these things. And then yeah, when I started taking the prereqs for nursing, and I think that break from college, from work, that break from college, going into the workforce, and then coming back to school was very good for me because not only did it, I felt like I had a more mature approach to school. Like the stuff that I'm learning, these are the foundations of how it's going to affect people. And so made me take my studies more seriously, but I just felt like, man, I can really learn how to do this. It doesn't have to do with intelligence. It has to do with the amount of effort that I'm putting in. After I found out that I could pick up certain things a lot faster and better than I thought, it just kept building like compounding interest, and it just kept pushing me toward that direction.
Can you kind of explain your med school journey to me? Like, what was that process like? And then ultimately what you chose to do?
There was a guy in my microbiology class. His name is Caleb, and he was working at a biotech at the time, and that's when I was kind of iffy about the nursing thing. And so he said, "Why don't you just apply and then see what happens?" I actually got a call back a year later to interview and eventually work for them. But I was working that job while discerning that process to get into med school, and then once I had decided I want to do more in this medical profession, it was I was working that job full time and then taking classes part time because I had to do all the prereqs for medical school, which are a little bit more vigorous than nursing school. And so, man, it was just really rough going through the classes because you have to have a pretty good grade, because you want to show your transcript. Those are also the foundations for taking the MCAT, which is pretty much like the entrance or screening exam, similar to the SATs to get into college. It's that for medical school, and just getting the experience that you need. So it's just a heavy season of trying to do everything, but everything really well because you want to be a competitive applicant. And I just kind of found myself in the process being swayed by other physicians that I'm shadowing or around, and how they're saying it's not worth it for them. And it was kind of disheartening to hear because I was like, what do you mean? Like, this is the dream job that everyone wants to be a doctor, or it's looked upon as such a prestigious title, right? But when you look at their work life balance, depending on their specialty, it's man, I couldn't see myself living like that for the rest of my life. Um, I wasn't worried so much about the debt, which is like a huge thing too, but it was more of the day to day. Can I really do this? And so um, decided it was not for me, and I I had gotten into medical school, but I asked for a year deferment just to really make sure it was something I wanted to do, because it's a huge commitment, and you don't really have time and space for a lot of things outside, whereas I had so many different interests that I wanted to pursue. And so, yeah, I gave up my seat to someone else, and I'm really happy about it.
How did you make that decision though? Because it's a different thing where if you applied to med school and you didn't get in, you could be like, closed door, this is not what I'm supposed to do. You got in and you did all the studying, you did the work, like there was so much investment. Like what bumped you over the edge to be like, I'm okay with giving up all of that?
The shadowing was one of the best things for me. I see why medical schools have it as a requirement now, because you have to see the reality of the job. Because you might be watching Grey's Anatomy or Scrubs and have this hmm, glorified picture of what being a doctor looks like, but most of the time it's really hard and demanding. Like I was saying earlier, depending on your specialty, your work life balance could be not in your favor, especially if you value time with family and friends like that. And so, yeah, I kept trying to imagine myself if I was in the doctor's shoes that I was shadowing that day. Would I really be able to do this until I retire? Pretty much. And although helping people is extremely rewarding, I just really couldn't see myself. And I already was feeling burnt out just thinking about doing this for 30 or so years, right? It was just kind of a lot of prayer, a lot of counseling with trusted friends and mentors, and just really talking through the decision. Why do I really want to do this? And the counseling really helped. Professional counseling helped because it helped me to it revealed like a lot of insecurities and stuff that I was dealing with. And I was wondering, they said that everyone has a drive, and it's coming from something, right? There's like a push and pull. And when you find that a lot of really successful athletes and entrepreneurs, they had like some sort of deficit or something that they were trying to overcome, and it really pushed them to new heights, which is incredible, for them. But it's also there is something there that you have to deal with eventually. And so, and even if I did become a doctor and then ended up sticking with it, I felt that if I didn't deal with those issues, I would always be trying to get to the next level, and it would just be this relentless cycle of the next thing, the next title, the next research paper, or whatever. And it was extremely exhausting.
I guess if you were to put it in like Christian terms, spiritual formation, you becoming like spiritually healthy, more aware of your motives, what drives you, understanding who you are, uh, helped you make a better vocational decision.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you did that. A lot of it wasn't just getting outside counsel regarding should I do this, it was getting counseling like therapy.
Yeah. That was a part of it for sure. And we were talking about this earlier, but yeah, just because a door is open doesn't mean it's from the Lord and you should take it. And I would say I just had to really learn how to discern during that time. Um, Not saying I'm the best at it now, but you really do have to take, if you're in a big life changing discernment process, I would highly recommend taking your time with it. Do not rush it.
Yeah, that's a huge key, huge principle for discernment. How did you land where you are now then?
After deciding that I would not go to med school, I was extremely free, but also extremely anxious. And I the church I'm going to now, there's a creative director, and I was always interested in starting a YouTube channel and just getting into learning how a camera works. I knew absolutely nothing, and he taught me almost everything I know. And I just kind of fell in love with the work, and it just makes me so happy. I don't know, just uh, doing this media production, photography, videography, editing. It's something that it taps into my creative side, which I felt has laid dormant, but also been pushed aside because I felt that I need to be STEM, Justin. I need to be logical. I need to be this this person, engineer, doctor, lawyer, you know, and I don't have time for silly creative things. And that's how I looked at, the creative arts. But I was always a really creative kid growing up. I drew a lot, and I love that process. And I almost felt like I was finding myself again while doing this and finding out how much I loved and enjoyed it. Yeah, I've just been going with it ever since, and a lot of doors have opened up, a lot of people and that I was able to meet and learn from, and I feel at so much peace. I know that peace shouldn't be your only variable in your discernment, but when I submitted my life to the Lord and just said, God, I think I just want to be used by you. I don't really care what it looks like anymore. And when this stuff just started happening, I I'm just kind of running with it. I still don't know what the end goal really looks like for me, but I know that the Lord is doing a lot in me and the people around me through this.
Explain that piece, because for you, I guess, in some of these other things you've done, I'm sure you felt some level of being comfortable or enjoying it for a season, what you were working on. What's like the difference between, for you in your mind, when it comes to what you're doing now and the peace that you feel versus maybe just being comfortable with the decision or kind of feeling good about it?
I know that the work that I'm doing now, although some work can be client work, I'm I don't really care what people's opinion is on it. I I don't know if that makes sense, but
Unpack that a little bit. It makes sense to me when I hear you, but explain that a little bit.
I could do a project for really prestigious brand, or I could do it for a nonprofit down the street, and they're both as valuable for me because I feel that my heart and where I'm doing it from is so much different than if I was a doctor trying to get good patient outcomes. Genuinely feel like how well I do the work is like a reflection of my love for the client, or like hopefully they're able to see Jesus through like even my interactions with them, whether it be uh, shooting like in filming or just admin or communication with them. It's like all of it.
It's not tied so much to people's approval or perception of your work, but that actually frees you to love people and try to do really excellent work.
Mm, yeah.
Wow. Well, then I guess if you were to just do like a quick run through from every like major vocational track that you were pursuing, what got you into it, what transitioned you out into the next thing, and then so on and so on.
I think we already talked about the tennis one. It was, at the time, Roger Federer, he was still playing. He was in his prime. And Nadal. And I think being in youth group, I was like, man, I really want to be a light on the ATP tour. And I wonder if there's anyone evangelizing or praying with these people, that don't know Jesus. And so that was I could honestly say that was probably one of my main motivators. Was I want to be a light. Uh, I want to impact people's lives on the tour pretty much. And then, you know, I mean, I prayed that, and I had so much fun along the way. But yeah, I think reality kind of set in for me, and I don't know. It just kind of shut in that way for me. I decided to shut it. The Navy SEAL, I was like all ready to go enlist and like go through buds. I actually don't really know why I didn't end up going through with it. Yeah, it's always been kind of one of those ambiguous things for me. Um,
Sometimes that happens.
yeah.
Sometimes you're going for something and it kind of just doesn't work out, or you lose interest or something else.
I think that's why the firefighting, it probably piqued my interest more than Navy SEALs,
Okay, so kind of supplanted that.
because my uncle's a firefighter, and just being influenced by him, I look up to him, and he was always saying since I was a kid, you should join the fire service. You should start testing, and great schedule, good benefits. People really like you, relative to being a cop, because you're seen as, a hero or whatever, in a different way. I saw my first dead body during one of the calls. Yeah, and it was a really bad car wreck in the middle of the night. I remember my captain, he said, "Don't look if you don't have to," because the stuff that I saw when I was 19 or whatever, when he started, he still remembers them. And that's when the reality kind of set in terms of the emotional toll of being a first responder and going into people's homes. Because there are plenty of times when, people call 911, it's an emergent call, and people are super scared, and you have to somewhat bring order to the chaos. And I think I convinced myself for a long time that I could do that. But after seeing the body and realizing this isn't this isn't an uncommon occurrence, this is part of the job, I knew I couldn't do it anymore. Um, yeah, it was almost like a pride thing too, because I couldn't let it go for a while. Because I was like, I can get over this. Um, yeah, but I had to be real with myself. Like, yeah, same for me. And then it's nursing next, I think. Um, Great job. People thought I'd be good at it pretty much, so that's why I pursued it. Then the biotech thing was that was my first real corporate job, and so I wanted to just get that experience, and it would be a good resume builder for med school. And then, yeah, with medical school, just trying to win people's approval pretty much, and finding out later that that's a terrible life to live. And so, yeah, pastoral thing I think we already talked about. Want to be like my mentors, and felt like that was within the gifts and talents that God gave me. And so, yeah, I'm finding that for I'm finding out for that one though. I don't necessarily have to do vocational ministry to act as a pastor or minister to people in that way.
So it sounds like a lot of what you've said, at least in your journey, has been a lot of external influences, whether people told you that you'd be good at something and then it kind of aligned with your gifts. So you're like, maybe I'll try it. Or saw a mentor figure, somebody else doing it, somebody who you looked up to. And so you thought you would try it. Or there was maybe external validation that you were looking for, or you thought it was cool. But a lot of kind of external influences, all of which none by themselves there's anything wrong with any of those things, but you realize recognizing and realizing that none of those was actually it. And then it's interesting that where you're at now, it's not the case. It wasn't externally driven in terms of why you chose to do it from like somebody else speaking into you and saying you should do this. Is that kind of accurate, you think?
I think that's very accurate. You put it a lot more simply and better than I could have put it.
Well, that's why I wanted to do the timeline thing. I wanted to kind of get in, pack it all into like one little piece. Again, not that there's anything wrong with somebody speaking into you, pointing something out, saying, I think you'd be good at this. Some people do find their vocation that way, and that's great. Um, but in terms of your journey, it was significant that it wasn't that.
Yeah, and I think it will really depend on the type of person too, because I was never super headstrong and knew always knew what I wanted to do, but I know some people are like that, and that's how they go. But you're right, there's a difference because that's more internally driven, whereas I was like whichever way the wind takes me kind of thing. So
So would you say in some sense you were one really impressionable, like pretty easily influenced by other people's opinions and maybe some people pleasing?
100%, a
Okay.
lot of people pleasing,
How'd you get past that? At least vocationally to
at
get to
least
the point where,
vocationally.
yeah.
It wasn't just one time, but there are multiple times when I get home from whatever, whether it be a job or hanging out with friends. I'm sitting there all alone, right? And you have to come home to yourself every day. And it got to a point where I was just getting so exhausted. And I really asked myself, what did I just do that for? Whether it was like a way of talking myself up in front of people, or telling people, yeah, like I'm a firefighter or I work in biotech. And you have to live with yourself. No, none of those people are with me at home, right? And I had to really realize that this no one really cares, you know? Even when you're talking, people are usually pretty focused on their own lives. And so it's like, oh, cool, and then they're probably thinking about themselves or something else. But it's like, yeah, just know you have to come home to yourself. A big thing was the fear of God was kind of instilled upon me during that season too. Um, a lot of stuff Susan said, but one thing she said that really stuck with me was, you know, at the end, you're you have to stand before the Lord. Your spouse isn't gonna be there. Your kids aren't gonna be there. Your accolades or your job's not gonna be there. You're just gonna have to stand and give an account to everything you've done before the Lord. And I just realized when I was thinking about that, I wanted to bring all the stuff that I did, but I knew that none of that was to please God. It was to please others. And I asked the Lord, God, I want to please other people so badly. I want to like I really want to be cool. I really want to um, be someone that people are proud to be around. And I just need your help in living a life for the things that matter, pretty much. And then the Lord was faithful with that prayer. And slowly but surely, just things started working out. And there are a lot of moments where I'm still tested with pleasing people and having to say no to certain things. But I get to kind of exercise that part of my discernment and obedience and recognize that if this isn't aligned with how I want to stand in account with the Lord, then I'm not going to do it.
So it sounds like that is one major aligning question for you when it comes to your discernment process, right? Yeah. Like the fear of God. Who am I pleasing? Right. What else? Like, how has your discernment process matured from like those early days? And do you have any other things like self check questions or other things that have you've seen in your discernment process how it's changed from then to where you're at now?
You know, the things that you say yes to, especially like vocationally, does it take away from something that I feel like the Lord has called me to? The the mental capacity, the time, the energy. And so that's something that I I ask myself a lot. And I make sure that I'm in community. I think during those early adolescent years, while I reached out to people, I was pretty alone through a lot of this decision making process, which is, I think it's needed some alone time to just sit before the Lord and tell him about it. But also, like, I have this group of mentors and people that I trust, and I run things by them. I think it's in Proverbs, right, with the counsel of many. I can't quote it, but
In an abundance of counselors, there is safety.
it's just a really big check for me. I'm I'm grateful that I have it, and I'm gonna use it if I have it. So that's a huge thing.
And just to like build on that a little bit, it's interesting how you can be surrounded by community and yet no one knows you and no one knows your process. Like you have to intentionally share that. Like you can be surrounded by a bunch of great people, great church, great whoever, but unless you're actually being transparent and sharing that with people, uh, you'll feel surrounded and still feel like no one really knows you, and then no one's actually giving you that counsel.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something about that too. The mentors and the people that are within that circle that I reach out to, we're aligned on that one thing. They fear God and they love God, and they're they know that all the decisions I'm making, they know like my endpoint because it's the same as their endpoint. How are we gonna stand before God? And that gives me a little bit of like peace too, because it's like the core of who I am and what I'm living for, they see it too. That's why when I was going through counseling that wasn't Christian counseling, it was really hard to share outside of like, it was hard to share my faith because of the most important foundation of who I am. They just don't understand it. And then when I switched to Christian counselor, it was so much easier to talk about because my they're understanding where I was coming from and my end goal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Any other guiding principles or anything when it comes to your discernment process?
Sometimes you just got to do things. You can have a lot of theories in your head and ideas of what a decision will be, but you really don't know until you try it. And I mean, hopefully, you trying it doesn't lock you in to this huge commitment. But if you're able to try something, try it.
I love what you said in your recent podcast with Johnny Kang. He asked you, "How do you learn?" And your first answer was by failing. You didn't even say by trying or by doing, or by reading or something. Like you just literally said by failing.
Yeah. It's like when you take a test and you're reviewing the answers, you're going to review the ones that you failed, but you don't necessarily review the ones that you got correct. But sometimes you have to review the ones you got correct too, because that could have been off a whim or like a lucky guess. But yeah, like the ones, the stuff that's stuck the most with me is like when I fail.
What was it like being completely convinced that you were supposed to do something and then realizing later that that wasn't it?
When I was trying to get into med school and I really believed that this was what I was supposed to do because doors opened and all that stuff, right? Just found favor in it. There were so many times when I had to force myself to remember my reasoning behind it. And I had to constantly convince myself that this was the right thing to do. The difference between that time and now, it's like I don't really have to convince myself to do this. It's a joy for me. There are hard days and things that I don't like about the job sometimes, but pales in comparison to the joy that I find in doing it. Med school, I had to convince myself every day to study, every day to go shadow, and I was just miserable, so miserable. And so, even though I was convinced and I felt like I could keep pushing on, I really felt like I was forcing it. And that's something that, I mean, I don't think that's even in the character of God to force things upon people, right? But just like he doesn't force a calling on you, like you have to agree to it. um I don't know if that's biblical, don't quote me on that. um I'm sorry, Lord, I don't know what I'm saying.
Let me clean it up for you a little bit. There is an aspect where you are recognizing that God has designed you a certain way, that He has given you a certain temperament, that He has given you certain natural capacities and skills, and that desire and joy are aspects of discerning whether you should do something, especially when you are given choices. That's not the same as you're not given a choice. You have to push through. You need to do something simply because there's no other option. Or you're just in a temporary hard season where you need to push through, you need to work hard, you need to remind yourself, convince yourself. That's not the same thing as choosing to do that and be pushing through in an area, a vocational area where your whole life you'd be miserable by your own choice. That would be foolish, I would say, and not in alignment with understanding how God designs and gifts people.
Yes,
Does that clean it up a little bit for
I
you?
was a stiff-necked people.
I think that is good to note though. Like you were completely convinced, and then seeing that was like a big check for you. Like maybe this actually isn't right. And then having to go from I'm convinced, I've told everyone I'm convinced, I've told everyone this is what I'm going to do, and then you have to, you know, be like it's not, and I'm going to shift. I'm going to realign, and you have to go through that whole process of communicating that. And so that's crazy that you've done that a few times.
I mean, it was a pretty big shock to my family, especially because I think I maybe about a month or two after I just told them the idea that I don't know if I'm gonna go. My uncle was like "미친놈," which means like you crazy man. Well, I'm not gonna say who, but someone in my family. First time they told me they were proud of me was after I got into med school,
Oh my
because
gosh.
it was like that affirmation that I was seeking. But what was crazy was it didn't. Like, I was like, it wasn't worth it to hear that.
Wow.
Yeah, and learning how to say no, even when it seems like it's the right thing to do, was something that I learned during that time as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a common thing when you seek affirmation, especially from a key figure. When you finally do it and you finally get it, it's kind of like this wasn't that great.
Yeah, and maybe it's something people need to experience, but I can tell you from the other end of it wasn't worth it.
One thing you've mentioned a lot is you've been mentored or learned from like a ton of people. And so I guess if you were to try and make up a number, an estimate, like how many vocational mentors have you had? And then maybe like more importantly, like how did you find all of them? Because I think a lot of young people, they want to grow, they want to learn, they don't know how to find mentors, they don't know how to ask. But this seems like it's been easy peasy for you.
Mentors that have genuinely poured into me, probably like 50.
Wow.
And what's crazy is I could probably hit up any of them right now, and it would just be like the time that I was there during that season. So grateful for that.
Like, how did you build? And especially, you just said like you could still hit up any of these people. Just to tell you how it kind of works a lot in corporate, at least, because that's been most of my experience when it comes to mentorship, or it's usually very seasonal. Which I'm not saying you're actively talking to any of these people, but the fact that you could say like I can actually go and hit up all these people, and it's not like this transactional thing. Like, it's so relational with how you've done it. Like, how did that happen? How did you get that?
Wherever I was at the time, whether there was like a part time job or in school, there was always someone that I connected with. And it just comes from a conversation for the professors and teachers that I connected with. I went to office hours because I needed help with a homework assignment or something. And then you just, after you go and you reach, and I wasn't going for a mentorship, I was going for help. And it kind of blossomed into something that I don't think either of us expected. I'm sure they were just expecting like this student's going to come help with this challenging homework assignment. I'm going to help them, we're going to move on. But then sometimes they start talking about their life, or I bring up something, and a lot of times I'm just able to like I bring up something like, what would you do in this circumstance that's outside of the homework assignment? And they give me their input, and I'm like, man, that was really helpful. I really appreciate you. And it just kind of grows and develops. It's a lot easier to go to office hours, or sometimes they'll like pull me aside or whatever. I don't know if this is making any sense, but
Well, it sounds like one, you would get in their way. Like, you would get in front of them somehow. So go to office hours. You're asking for help. Um, you're finding some way to get around these people, and then you're not engaging them just transactionally. Like, can I get your help in this area? You're engaging them as a whole person by asking them about an area outside of whatever their topic of expertise necessarily is. Like, yeah, you want homework help, but then you're asking them a question: what would you do in this situation? And so you're actually building a relationship that way. And that's it's not meant to be formulaic, like this is how you do it, but that's how you naturally just build relationships. You aren't viewing somebody in terms of just their position, you're recognizing it. Like, you're my professor, you're a senior, whatever, but you're seeing the whole person and engaging them as a whole person.
yeah, it's definitely, I think people can really pick up when you're just trying to get something from them. But I mean, I was trying to get help with my homework, but I was just really grateful for them for even taking the time, even though it's like their job or whatever. I think one thing that I have done over the years was I have never waited to ask for help. If I needed help, I just ask. The worst thing that they can say is no, or I don't have enough time, or maybe later. You lose nothing when you do that. And I didn't even think of it as like a net gain or whatever. It was just like, man, I really need help. I hope I can find help, but I have to ask. You have to open up your mouth and ask. Otherwise, nothing will happen. And yeah, like I think there's been seasons for me where I've waited on the Lord and just like literally did nothing. And maybe there are times for that, but I mean, he gave you some legs for walking. He gave you a mouth for talking. Like it's okay to like reach out for help, and what you choose to do with that help, whether it's good help or bad, because there's both. Um, at least you went out and like you look for it.
Was there ever a situation where you personally were scared or intimidated to ask for help ever?
Probably back. No, not too much, honestly.
How about this then? What has helped you recognize and realize that you need help?
Sometimes it's you're doing something and it's not working, and you're like, man, I need help. And then sometimes you just get humbled. Like you think you're really good at something, and then you see someone like doing it so much better. I think it helped a lot when it came to like sports and stuff. Um, you think you're like so good. Like I thought I was so good at tennis, and then I play against someone that's like, shutting down all of my attacks and strategies, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, man, you're better than me, even though I hate to admit it. You're better than me, and can I learn from you? It's as simple as that, I think, for me.
Swallowing your pride.
Yeah, it is not easy, but actually, the more you do it, though, I can guarantee it does get better.
So it's a muscle you can flex.
Yeah.
I guess here's one thing, because you've talked about you're really good at just trying things and failing and then learning from it. Was there anything that you would have done differently in your vocational discernment process that were like unnecessary mistakes? Like things you didn't have to learn the hard way?
Okay. Here's a pretty practical example. I am working for a digital marketing agency part time, and I'm doing my business, right? The goal for the business in this time is so that I can build up my own client base and then like be able to make a living off of it. I'm within my This is my second year of business, right? So relatively new. Sometimes when I go on dates or like meet people, I'm thinking I've got nothing to show for. I just have I have enough that covers my basic needs. How will I ever provide for a family or just anything? And I'm tempted all the time to like my uncle's texting me saying, "Hey, you should become a firefighter. You should do this." A lot of people are like, "You should be a cop," because all my friends in jiu-jitsu are cops. Um, and I have so many like I don't know if they're temptations, but so many pathways that I could go down so that I look like I have my life put together right now. But I know that that's not in line with the vision for my life. And so saying no to that has been something I'm just constantly going through.
Wow. So even though you know you're in your sweet spot when it comes to what you should be doing, there are still things that try to take you off of that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's good to know, because I think some people think that once you find what you're like called to do, it's just grind and nothing else gets in the way of that. But there's still distractions.
100%.
Jeez, I understand. I still get business ideas all the time. I'm like working on my channel and then I'm like, oh, I could start this business or that business. Man, no, so I understand. I resonate with that strongly. Um, Last thing, so you have your own YouTube channel. You have Hungry Justin. What's your channel about, I guess? And then how would you personally describe it as like a ministry from the Lord?
Okay. So, Hungry Justin, the name originally came because I am hungry a lot for food. And yeah, originally it was just going to be a food channel where I do some mukbangs, which is like an eating show or some sort of cooking because I really enjoy it. But when I was doing the logo design with Annabelle and Peter, I I realized like, man, I'm really hungry to get better at things. I'm really hungry for knowledge. I'm hungry for like relationships and hungry to become a better filmmaker and storyteller and just kind of growing this channel. And so, yeah, I'm just trying to, as a whole, it's just like giving like an attitude of like becoming better and then really highlighting the little things in life because I don't live an extravagant life, but I find so much joy in it. And I think I just like sharing that aspect too. Ministry perspective, something that's always stuck out with me for this channel is, you know, being a light, you know. You're not going to cover a lamp. Uh and I'm wrestling with this now too, where you don't have to have a YouTube channel and you don't have to be in the limelight to be a light. But I'm finding that through the comments and the joy that I have like creating these videos, and especially, you know, my podcast, which is about, you know, highlighting the relationships in my life that have made an impact on me and wanting to share those nuggets and wisdom with the audience. It's maybe this is like the way, at least for this season, to be a light. Because if I just had these conversations behind closed doors, which, you know, some conversations need to be there, but stuff that I really want to share with people that I feel like people can grow and gain something from, like I shouldn't be hiding it or keeping it to myself. That sort of thing.
So where can people find you?
At Hungry Justin for the YouTube, and then the Instagram handle is at underscore Hungry Justin.
Nice. And then Transitions podcast.
It's actually just on the main channel for Hungry Justin, so you'll find all the podcast episodes there.
Awesome. Well, any closing thoughts or words before we wrap up?
It's okay to take your time with decisions. I don't think you make the best decisions when you're in a rush or you make a decision out of fear or anxiety. But take your time, wait on the Lord, seek counsel, seek help, and ultimately, God has got you. He's in your hands. Your life is in His hands, and He is a good God and good Father. And so, um, believe and trust in that.
Amen. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.